Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome to our second webinar for the year for the UK market. Today you're going to be joining us at Orkestra to talk about selling batteries starts with electricity tariffs. So it's really, really important to understand the fundamentals of electricity tariffs. Just while I'm waiting for everybody to get in here, I can see people coming in right now. It's been great. We've had a lot of feedback on the white paper we released recently. A lot of good questions coming through, both from our customers and also a lot of people interested in using the software. So before we get started, while people are still coming in, I do have a quick little poll that I'm just going to run. So all I'm going to really ask here is, what sort of experience does your organization have with commercial electricity tariffs and understanding them, the concepts of them, understanding the depths of them, and how to model with them? So I'm just going to launch this poll. It should pop up on your screen. If you could just take a couple of seconds to give some feedback on that, that would be fantastic. So you should be able to see that on the screen now. All right, well, we might get started. So, yeah, my name's Tyler Jackman. I'm the head of sales here at Orkestra. Joining me today is James Allston, who is our co-founder, co-CEO, and head of growth for Europe. And today we're going to run through a lot of stuff, but we're going to start off with, selling batteries starts with really understanding electricity tariffs. So the objective today is understanding the importance of that. So really unpacking different tariff structures, how they work, and if you're looking to sell batteries, what's the importance of those electricity tariffs and how do they impact the viability of battery opportunities? And then James is going to take you through a walkthrough of Orkestra and show you exactly all of these things and how the things that he's discussed and talked about in action of how we would go and set that up in Orkestra and model them in the platform. So I guess James is going to be handling majority of the webinar today and talking about why tariffs are the key enabler to batteries, which is about 15 minutes. And then we've got about 20 minutes of demo time where James is going to be running through some specific projects. So a couple of like a SME project and a larger commercial industrial project, just to see the differences there on how we can start working with tariffs to get and unpack the most value out of solar and battery projects. Then within a lot of the research that we've done over the last couple of months, we've got some really interesting finding around where are the best locations around the UK for C&I batteries, which is very, very interesting. And then at the end, we're going to have some time for Q&A, about 10 minutes. There is a Q&A button down the bottom. So please, as the webinar goes through, feel free to leave questions in there. I can try and answer them as we go, but at the end, we will have time to unpack those. If the webinar does go over, we will, and there's still more questions to answer. Don't worry, we'll push on for a little bit. Okay, next slide. Thanks, James. So for those of you that don't know who Orkestra are, we are very much on a mission to enable teams to decarbonize and electrify the world's businesses. So how do we do this? We have software that enables very quick and efficient feasibility modeling. We're working with companies across 5 different countries at the moment. And you can see down the bottom there that we're pretty excited. We've had over 30,000 different commercial industrial projects modeled in the platform. And over those projects, we're looking at about 4 million different solutions modeled. So we've got lots and lots of data and lots of learning across multiple countries and continents to understand where the best opportunities are for commercial solar and battery. So before I hand over to James, I just want to give a little bit of background here of what we've seen in the UK, just to really set the scene. So probably no surprise that in 2022, we saw a massive increase in electricity prices in the UK, which has very clearly driven a huge boom in the solar industry. So residential was making up the biggest proportion of that. But in 2024, we started to see that commercial industrial solar installations really started to pull forward or at least be about 50% of that segment. So very, very exciting. Generally, what happens after a huge solar boom is it opens up a lot of opportunities for the next step, which is batteries. So what we've seen in that market is this perfect storm where we've got solar installation costs dropping down over 30%. We've got the cost of batteries, and we're seeing some very, very sharp pricing coming out for battery packs at the moment, which is very exciting. So battery packs dropping down 80%, and the energy prices increasing. So with all of that wrapped in together, we're starting to see a massive interest in obviously companies looking for how do they cut costs on electricity, but also these lowering cost of technologies. That's made this very, very viable. However, we do need to go and have a look at how to get the most value out of these sites and what are the opportunities there for solar, not just solar, but also batteries. So with that, I'm going to hand over to James, who's going to take you through a bit of a deep dive into tariffs, and then we're going to go further into demo mode. Thanks, James.
Ripper, thank you very much, Tyler. Yeah, I'm particularly excited about this webinar. As someone commented on my LinkedIn a few days ago, I'm a bit obsessive about tariffs at times. So for me to actually have a whole webinar dedicated to tariffs is like something quite exciting for me, which I know makes me a massive nerd. But like, I think you'll quite quickly see in this webinar exactly why it's so important and why, as someone who's providing software to help people model battery projects, is one of the main reasons why people come to us. Explaining the link between the tariffs and batteries is just so critical to understand. So here we are. So anyway, first thing to start off with is a nice little rule of thumb. Okay, so we've modeled stacks of battery projects, and a great little rule of thumb that everyone should have in their head is that battery projects start to make sense when you've got a battery that can cycle once a day and that the value of the energy that it's cycling is around 16p. So as everyone would be familiar with a battery is not a passive asset. It's not like solar where you can just bolt it to the roof, wire it into an inverter, plug it in, and then suddenly it starts creating value, right, in the form of electrons coming out of the solar panels. A battery is an active asset, meaning that you have to control it and you have to do something with it. If you've got a AA battery, unless you stick that AA battery into something and start clicking on a switch like a torch, it's not actually going to produce any value. So the way that you have to think about batteries is that you have to cycle them, and you have to cycle them actively, and when you are cycling them, that the value of that cycle is worth 16p per kilowatt hour. So a nice little tidy example that everyone is familiar with, and this is like where most people come to batteries. It doesn't matter whether you're a solar installer or a customer, right? So you will no doubt solar installers that are on this call, we have customers that are coming to them and like, great, I've got this solar system. Can I, rather than exporting to the grid, should I put this energy into a battery and use it later? Great use case for a battery. And on the face of it, the logic of it, seems pretty good. So if we take some like pretty standard tariff numbers that you see in the UK market today, the cost of charging that battery would be the lost revenue that you wouldn't get from exporting. So there would be 6p as a reasonable starting point. And then the discharge value, which is using that energy later rather than drawing from the grid, would be whatever you're saving at. So you have a lovely flat rate tariff of 26p, you're saving that 26p. And the difference, 20p. So doesn't this work? Like, what's the problem here? Like, why are we having this conversation? Well, the issue is that exporting is only happening half the year. And this is a universal problem, right? In anywhere that you pretty much like north at, projects have been installed where you've got a strong winter and a summer, and lots of export is occurring of that energy during the summer months, and then stuff all is happening during the winter because it's dark and gloomy as it is in the UK or Germany. Where I'm from in Tasmania, same problem exists. Dark and gloomy in the winter months, you're not getting much generation out of the panels. Of course, the radiance is coming in at a very low angle, so you're not actually getting much off that solar. So there's nothing to store. So from a battery utilization perspective, yes, you're getting a really nice tight little arbitrage opportunity there for half the year, but the other half of the year is doing nothing. So what do you do in this case? Well, I want to come up a level and sort of actually talk to like, well, let's just think about the purpose of a battery. Okay, so the kind of logical starting point is, as I've just pointed out, someone's installing a solar. I don't want to install my energy, send my energy to grid. So why don't I store it? But like, as I've just demonstrated, that use case isn't going to work very often. And what we need to do now is to zoom back up and go, right, well, what are we actually trying to achieve by installing a battery? And this gets really, really critical when you start talking about commercial opportunities, because when you're talking about commercial opportunities, it's less about the kind of, if you're approaching, say, residential, a lot of companies that are coming in and looking at residential opportunities that are just a customer in many cases already made a decision that they want to proceed with solar. So it comes down to the price, whether they like the salesperson, and what are the aesthetics of the system that's being sold to them. Whereas in the commercial world, the objectives are very different. They tend to be much more commercially focused, and there'll be a specific thing that a company is looking to achieve by installing these systems. And we identify 5 main criteria of which will be drivers for installing a battery system at a site. So the first one is the obvious one, which is reducing costs. So we're going to reduce the bill costs. The second one is making a valuable investment. So, I mean, these systems are producing, 15 to 25% IRR, and this is pretty bankable returns as well. That's really, really strong returns versus, putting your money into a savings account of some sort. I was talking with a customer the other day, and they're like, oh, the customer tells me that they don't want to proceed with this solar investment because they can get 8% in their property trust fund or whatever it is. And I'm like, well, go back to them and show them the IRRs, because 8%, we're looking at 16% IRRs out of these projects we're looking at versus 8. So, making a case around it being a valuable investment is sometimes a really good driver. Improving cost certainty. So if you're living in the UK and you've just gone through the crazy price shocks of 2022, you might still be really hurting if energy is a big part of your operating costs. And so finding a way to removing your exposure to the grid is a good driver to getting a battery. And this is one of the really good ways of improving your energy independence and making sure that you've got more certainty around your costs in the future. Reducing emissions, obviously. So being able to have more of your energy supplied locally by your solar system as opposed to pulling to the grid. And then finally, ensuring a reliable supply, which is not as big an issue in the UK, as the grid's a little bit more reliable than the very stringy grid that we have in Australia, but it still comes up. And we had a case just a couple of weeks ago looking at a large manufacturing problem with brownouts. So, these are the 5 different cases for selling a battery, of which 4 of these tariffs are foundational. And if we're not looking at tariff optimization, we're not going to make these things stack up. So when we're thinking about batteries and battery value stacks in this commercial industrial space, if it's not solar self-consumption, then what does the value stack look like? Well, the value stack, we break it into 2 different parts when we're thinking about projects. We think about tariff optimization opportunities for a battery, and then we think of market participation opportunities for a battery. And both of these obviously exist in the commercial industrial space. So on the tariff optimization, yes, bill savings from solar self-consumption is first cab off the rank. The next one is time of use arbitrage. That's the common opportunity that exists. Arbitraging the Duos red, amber, green rates, moving a customer onto a octopus shapeshifter tariff, as I'll show in a minute, is a way of doing time of use arbitrage. The next one, which is kind of lesser known, is if you've got pass-through bills, reducing capacity market levies is a really amazing opportunity. The next one would be availability recharge reduction. So this is a little bit more complicated because you've got to convince a customer to have less capacity than they otherwise were previously doing, purchasing from the DNO, but this is an opportunity to reduce as well. Demand reduction during the triads, again, you have to have a pass-through bill, but this is another opportunity that exists. And then finally, which is a little bit trickier to get to, is a very long lead times to this, but you can optimize the network bands that a customer is on as well. And that can have significant savings, in some cases over £100,000 a year, for HV customers. So these are the 6 sort of main different things that you can be thinking about when you're thinking about optimizing a project, and it'll be horses for courses. It'll depend on the type of project, the size of it, and we'll go through that in a minute. On the front emitter of opportunities, these obviously exist as well, and good news from Orkestra side is that we will be supporting P415 and capacity market modeling in the software as of this week. So that should be out by Friday, which is, we're pushing really hard to try and get that into the software as quickly as possible. That's another way of building the revenues into these opportunities. But this is really, we would strongly argue this is the cream and not the cake. And the reason it's the cream is that these things are, you are competing with all the other batteries that are trying to push into the market as well. And all the utility scale batteries have a commercial imperative to make money out of these particular market opportunities. Whereas behind the meter, you've got the full value stack. You've got all the network charges and distribution charges and everything that is sitting there behind the meter that you can be trying to reduce the costs of as well. So it is both, but the cake is the tariff optimization. So I want to sort of talk about 2 different types of project. So we've got SME projects, of which we've created this sort of fictitious site called Sunbrewed, which is, it's got a bill of £25,000 a year, an energy consumption around 100 megawatt hours per annum, and the types of opportunities that are available to this project are kind of somewhat similar to what you might see in a residential space, but scaled up. And so we're looking at solar self-consumption. We're looking at moving customers to time of use tariffs with really, really peaky rates, and doing those doing that time of use arbitrage. And then on the other side, with the sort of second type of project that you'll come across out there is much larger projects. So we talked about, we've created this sort of use case called amped up parts, and amped up parts is, about 10 times bigger than Sunbrewed. We're looking at an electricity consumption of 1.5 gigawatt hours per annum, so significant consumption on this site. And then the type of opportunities that are available to this project is solar self-consumption. It's the time of use arbitrage on the Duos red, amber, green rates. It's the availability charge reductions. It's the capacity market levy reduction, and it's the Duos demand charge reduction as well. And so the value stacks are very different. So you need to approach these projects with a different kind of lens. But again, the foundational piece to both of these opportunities is in the tariffs, and I'll explain why. So let's look at Sunbrewed as a nice little simple case to get our heads around first. So if we look at Sunbrewed, and here I've taken 2 identical days with and basically modeled the 2 different tariffs, and then shown the battery activity for the battery, which is the red on these charts. So on the left-hand side, we have solar self-consumption, which is, and we've got a lovely flat rate tariff here of 28p and an export of 3p, which is, neither here nor there. It might be 6, but look, it doesn't really matter. What we're looking at here is that the battery is charging when there's export until it's full, and then it's discharging until it's empty when there's import again. And so you're going to get 1 cycle a day as long as there's export on the solar. So this, of course, as I said before, looks like a reasonable arbitrage opportunity. The problem with this is that it's not there all year round. Whereas if we look at this time of use tariff, this is again the octopus shapeshifter tariff. So we've got this very, very high price for a short window in the afternoon between 4 and 7. So rather than being 28p anytime tariff over here, we're now looking at 41p as a peak rate. So, significantly higher price, which can be quite daunting as someone signing up for this. But the good thing is that it's only for a very short window, and for the rest of the time, you've actually got really cheap rates and significantly under the 28p. So 21 and a bit, and then nearly 18p for the night rate between 12 and 7. Same export. And what you see when you run a battery which has got like a tariff optimization over this is that it'll actually do some, some arbitrage in the morning. So it'll go, oh, actually the difference between, these rates actually is probably worth me going after. It'll store up with energy slowly through the middle of the day, and then it will discharge exactly into that peak. So even though that peak might overline, on the left-hand side, it's gonna, when the battery's discharging, it's kind of coincidental to when you're likely to get those peak rates. Here, the battery will actually focus on discharging into that period. And so you'll see the economics of that being reflective of that. You'll also see the battery activity reflective of that as well. So on the left-hand side, it's the same chart that I had before, where you've got the battery's only doing solar self-consumption and is busy for half the year and then dormant basically for the other half. When you add the time of use arbitrage to this, the battery is busy basically the whole year. And we go from a battery utilization on average of around 52% up to 94. So now we're in the money, right? Now we're starting to talk about a project that's actually going to work. And what we're actually going to see is that the economics are dramatically different, right? So here's one of the projects that we did as part of the playbook that we've released recently. When you looked at this that Sunbrew project, the optimal solar system for the site was a 60 kilowatt solar system. When you added a 40 kilowatt hour 2-hour battery with solar self-consumption only, the economics actually went backwards. The battery's not making enough money to pay for itself out of the solar self-consumption. When you do the tariff change with that, because when the battery is discharging, it's actually lining up with those peak periods reasonably nicely, you actually get a huge improvement to the economics. But actually what really makes the final bit of difference and improves it's like the additional cream on top, is adding the time of use arbitrage onto it as well. And so when there's in the winter months, now the battery is going to chase those arbitrage opportunities in the winter as well, and then that adds further value onto the top of the project. So when you're thinking about, as a solar installer, coming along and having a conversation with a customer, and the customer goes, great, let's look at a battery, your immediate reaction needs to be, well, let's look at your tariff. If you're not doing that, you're not in the money. You're going to present them with an opportunity where the economics go backwards. And what's the point? I mean, I would imagine that many of you have had this experience where you've just presented them with a battery and they can't see how the economics are going to work. And so you have to look at the tariff. Like, it is foundational to the success of you being able to sell that asset. So when we look at the C&I, so this is our bigger site where you've got the site is typically on a we see a combination of bills. So we see bills which are kind of like partial bundled or partial pass through, where you've got like some time of use, you've got the availability charges pass through, you've got the sort of the GEOS standing charges or availability charges are passed through. But it's not everything passed through. You're not actually haven't got a fully line itemed bill. But when you do see the fully line itemed bill, you've actually got a lot of opportunities here. And when we start to look at like where those opportunities are, you actually sort of got to think about them as to like, where are they in the bill and how are they making up the opportunity? So this is a bit of a complicated and busy slide, but let me sort of walk you through it. So if you think about any bill, regardless of being commercial and industrial, but any bill will be made up of various components of the energy system. So a whole tariff is there to reflect the generation, the transmission, the distribution, all the usage costs of running all the things like the markets, the feed-in tariff programs, all the other kind of like little weird things like the support programs for people that live in Scotland, the one that's called AAHDCE or whatever it is I can't remember the acronym, but basically these weird little programs that are all funded through the bill, and every customer pays for these programs, right? All these usage rates exist out there. It's just that when you have a look at a large customer bill in the UK, you'll see them all lovely, beautifully line itemed, and there'll be like 30 line items on the bill. So when you look at the breakdown of those different costs, about 31% of the costs for a commercial bill come from the energy costs. So that's the buying the energy from the wholesale markets. 25% of them come from the network charges, which is about half, incidentally, versus Australia. So Australia's network costs represent about half the bill. So you're actually doing quite well, having a much more like dense grid in the UK. You've got your operating costs, which is things like the balancing mechanism, ancillary markets, flexibility markets, etc. And then you've got the environmental, social, and other costs that are added in as well. And they, roughly quarters here. And here underneath is the kind of value stack opportunities that exist across all the bill. And I've highlighted the ones in sort of like the dark colors of which are the ones that are actually on the tariff. So what you can actually benefit from by just being on the right tariff and making sure that the customer has exposure to those rates. And the ones that are in the lighter here are the ones which require market participation and something that's a little bit more fancy. And the solar self-consumption obviously applies across all of these different aspects. So when you're doing solar self-consumption, you're basically providing your own little independent supply at a site, and you're reducing all the costs of the bill so they apply equally across everything. So when we look at these different tariffs for these larger sites, we can see like these sort of fully bundled bills where it's just a fixed rate and an anytime tariff on some sort of P per kilowatt hour, and then like a fixed charge which will be some sort of monthly or daily charge. Then we have these partially unbundled bills where you'll have a day-night rate or a peak off-peak rate, and these availability charges that exist as well. And then the fully unbundled or pass-through bills where everything is line itemed on the bill. And as you get more unbundled and as you're passing more price signal through to the customer, the value stack gets bigger and there is more opportunities for the battery. Now here I've kind of line item them in terms of the actual value stacks and like how to sort of how to think about them as the individual parts of the value stack. But if we look at that actually in the modeling and see how this looks when you do the modeling, we run these amped up parts example where we looked at a solar, here's a project where you've got a megawatt solar system, and then what are the net present values and IRRs of different batteries different sizes of batteries as you add them. So that for the fully bundled bill, every single battery size that you add to that project is actually going to reduce the net NPV, which means that it's reducing the value of the project and it's not paying for itself. When you go to the partially unbundled bill, it's still just as bad because a lot of these ones are day-night rates where you have a relatively small difference between the day and the night rate. So it might be, say, 20p at the night rate and 26p as the day rate. So we're only talking a 6p difference there. So when we come back to that 16p difference that I was talking about earlier, you just don't have it in that rate. And so what actually happens is because you've actually got this day rate, which is higher, it improves the economics of the solar. So the solar economics get better, which is good if you're selling solar. But again, you have the same problems for batteries, which is that none of the battery projects work. There's no optimal size. And then when you finally move a customer to an unbundled bill and everything is completely broken out and you have the duos red, amber, green rates on the bill, you've got the line item of the capacity market levies. You can optimize the availability charges as well. That's when you start to get optimal sizes occurring for the battery, and the battery adds value. Now, as you'll note, the economics for solar actually go down, but your battery project is now introduced. And this is when you're going to get a much bigger project by doing that. So when we look at that, like as a, like similar to the slide that I showed before, if you start off with a solar project here, whether these large customers, and then you add the battery to it, but you're only doing solar self-consumption, it's going to go backwards. It's not until you start looking at the optimized control of the battery plus making sure that the battery is on a pass-through tariff that you can actually optimize and do tariff arbitrage on, is that the economics of these projects start to improve, and then you're actually going to get a project that's going to work. And this is all before right? This is all before adding any of the front of meter value, right? So this is just about establishing a foundation by which the batteries can actually be economic. There's also another point that I want to make, and this is something that I've seen a lot of in the market since we've been chatting in the UK, is that a lot of solar installers, unfortunately, and also people financing projects as well, are taking these fully unbundled bills, which have all these beautiful price signals for batteries, and then blending out the rates to produce like a blended rate, which is very convenient. I completely get why people do it, and because it's a lot easier than trying to model 30 different line items on a bill. The problem with that is that it completely masks the battery opportunity, and it's like going back to those to just a flat rate tariff and doing solar self-consumption. It is not going to work, and all you're doing to do is hide really sort of viable battery opportunities by doing that to a particular project. And here's an example of like how that might work in the real world. So if we take up our amped up parts example, if we have a customer that's out there and they're trying to achieve a payback of under 6 years, and that's the hard threshold for them, and they're not willing to proceed with a project unless it has that 6-year payback. And if we start off with might just start off with a solar only project, and from a blended rate analysis. So if we take all those rates and we just collapse them down and we do the blended rate analysis, we're actually going to get our 5.7 years, which is great. So that actually means that this project is going to go ahead. But when we look at our detailed analysis, it's actually a bit less. And it's less because when you're blending the rates, you actually take away when the prices matter throughout a day. And if you think about when the solar is actually generating, it's all in the middle of the day. And actually what we need to look at is when you're doing the blended rates, if you are going to do that, you need to do a blending based on the daylight hours of when the solar is generating, not just take it across the entire bill. And so you end up seeing that the economics, the economics get a little bit better under this detailed analysis, but you can actually see it go completely the other direction as well, where you actually get less savings out of this as well. When you add the battery, if you're doing the blended rate analysis, now we've got paybacks that go above 6 years. So it's a deal breaker. We're not going to proceed with that project. But now once you add the tariff optimization into it as well, and we start to add that component in as an additional part of it, that's when you're going to actually have the project come back and start to make sense again. And so it is the layering of these 3 elements in together that ultimately make these projects make sense. So now I'm going to swap over to the Orkestra platform and just go through one of these projects. So I actually want to go through Sunbrood and show our Sunbrood project, which is it's actually a little bit different to the one that's in the white paper. I've made some small tweaks to it. This is the one that you'll find if you start a fresh trial of Orkestra today. You'll find this example project within the example projects that we have in that trial account. And so this project, I've put it in Liverpool. This is an area which has very nice octopus shapeshifter tariff. So I've been a little bit selective in terms of choosing one that's in a good location. But we've set it up here. It's got an import capacity of 100 kilowatts and export capacity of 30 kilowatts. We've used a brewery load profile, which looks like this. So we've got fair bit of heating going on in the winter months, and otherwise a fairly low load profile. So yeah, it's quite peaky, but actually majority of the load is actually quite low, which is it's not unreasonable for this type of site. And then I've set up just a simple flat rate tariff for this project. So I've got and this was pulled from British Gas website back in February. So 40p per day fixed charge for this site, and just under 28p as a anytime charge. And so I've now gone, okay, well, what is now the kind of optimal solar and battery size for this particular project? And I have actually just started off just looking at solar. So one of the questions that I wanted to look at was, if I could pack a bit more solar onto the roof, does it make sense to do so? So in this project, I was like, well, I could probably get up to 140 kilowatts on the roof. So I'm going to model two different solar profiles here. I'm going to do a south-facing one, and I'm going to do a sawtooth east-west facing project. And I'm going to look at like, what is now the optimal size for this particular site? And it's coming out at, from an economics perspective at least, a 60 kilowatt system has the optimal net present value for that site. And now I want to know, well, what happens if I add a battery to this project, and I add a tariff change. So now I want to look at I've added the octopus shapeshifter tariff to this project. So here I've set it up where I've got your peak rate at 41p, your day rate here at 21, bit over 21p, and the night rate at just under 18p. And you can see that the peak rates apply between 4 and 7 during the weekdays and weekends. The day rates apply for all other times during the day from 7 till midnight, and then otherwise it's the night rate. And so when I've run that, we've got a much larger range of results here. So we've got 140 different permutations of solution. And I just want to sort of take you through what's going on here. So if we color on the retail tariff change, we immediately see like a huge difference from shifting to this other tariff. And to be fair, like a lot of it's just coming from the retail optimization. So if we look at the tariff optimization and we just shift from going from the flat rate tariff to this time of use energy anytime tariff, we're going to get about £4,000 savings per year anyway, just by shifting this. So it's a no-brainer just to do the tariff change anyway, which is probably a good story to the customer that it's, they're not moving on to something that's going to potentially cost them a lot of money. But already we see that once you add both the solar plus the tariff change in, we're going to see a massive difference here. So here's the solar only case that we looked at before without the tariff change. And here is the solar only case with the tariff change, which is a really good start. But what we also see is that the optimal size, so if we now, rather than ranking these by solar size here, we rank them, just do a pure ranking and we look for the best project, we actually see that the optimal project increases in size. So we go from a 60 kilowatt system to now looking at an 80 kilowatt system with a 25 kilowatt hour to a just a bit under 1 hour, with a bit over 1 hour battery here. So that just moving the customer, even on if you're doing solar self-consumption, because there's a good overlay between those usage rates, and now you're discharging into really high price times, it is going to increase things quite considerably by moving them onto that tariff. So if we just look at that from a solar perspective again, we see that we've got everything's moved up. Now if we go to the optimized control, so now this is the battery that has not only the ability to do the solar self-consumption, charge up the battery when there's export, and then discharge in later. Now we've also got the opportunity to do the optimization for the usage rates as well. So in the winter, when there's not as much sun, we're going to charge up when there's no sun, and we're going to discharge in. Now, because the load is so low here, so even though it says 56 kilowatts, we're now looking at a very large system, 80 kilowatts. As I showed you before, like most of the maximum demand throughout the year is more like 25. So we do have a hugely oversized system. So we're not going to see quite as dramatic a change here by doing this as you might see on other sites, but it is definitely there. And when we actually map these together, so if we do the solar self-consumption versus the optimized control, and we color the control profile here, you can see this a little bit more clearly. So here we've got no control. So these are the solar only cases. Then we've got the solar self-consumption ones in dark blue. and then we've got the optimized time of use arbitrage. And so now we've gone from starting at a 60 kilowatt system, which was sort of the starting point, solar only. That was the optimal size, to now looking at the optimal system being an 80 kilowatt, 50 kilowatt hour battery, right? And from a cost difference, we've gone from a 60K investment up to 105K investment. So from a solar installer's perspective, you've now doubled your potential project size here, just in the one project. One less sale to do by now optimizing the battery, optimizing the tariff, and then installing that battery. We also see like the energy independence will increase pretty dramatically as well. So we go from having energy independence of around 30% for the solar only case, also going up to 42%. So what's that, about a 50% increase? So if you're trying to reduce your exposure to the grid, or you're trying to improve like the amount of carbon that you're reducing, or you're trying to reduce your carbon and you're doing that using local generation, this is a good solution for you. So this is like our simple example. So this is a smaller site. This is when you've got nice time of use rates from the Octopus shapeshifter. So you can go and just literally go onto their website, put in the postcode, pull the rates down and load them up into the software. So it's all kind of nice and transparent, relatively straightforward case to do here. But there is also cases like amped up parts where you have much more complicated bills, and that's where you have these bills with 30 odd line items on the bill. And so when you have a bill, it's going to look something like this, and that is you have a bunch of different charges, fixed charges, volume charges, all your different usage rates, and then your network tariff. And Orkestra now makes this relatively straightforward to deal with these types of bills. So previously, if you were using the software like even just a month ago, you had to go through and map each of the different line items into the software, which could take you about 20 minutes to do. We've just released a feature for the software, which means that we'll automatically populate most of the information for you. And there's some small changes that you have to do at the end, but it will save you the vast majority of the time. And this is a new AI feature that we've just released, an AI bill scan, which means that you can literally take a bill and drop it straight into the tool, and it'll start pulling all the information out of that bill and populating the site information for you. So what is actually going on here is it takes that PDF bill, it does image recognition across that bill, or reading the PDF. So it'll take images as well. So if you've got someone's scanned in a bill, like a physical bill, it'll also do the image recognition of those as well. And it'll take that information, and then it'll work through and identify the information on the bill that we now need to populate the site with. And so in this bill I've got here, let me just show you what the bill looks like. So I've taken this bill and de-identified it. So I've actually created a completely fictitious address. Well, I've taken a real address, but made it different to what this bill is actually from. But these bills are nice to present because when you read them, they're actually fairly logical in the way that they're structured. They actually, you can actually read through and go, well, there's the energy bit, there's the network bit, there's the transmission bit, there's the balancing services bit, there's the usage charges bit. So when you're looking at the bill, it's all actually relatively tidy in the way that it's structured. Many of them are just all the charges are thrown in together, and it's like 25 line items, and it's hard to actually pull out which ones are the bits that relate to the network tariff versus which are the bits that relate to the other parts of the bill. So we see that the bill is starting to get populated now, or the site, sorry, is starting to get populated. So here already we've got the name of the site has been pulled out. The address of the site has been pulled out. We've got our meter number is pulled off the bill, so the MPAN as well. So it'll actually identify the MPAN on the bill. I've anonymized this and made some changes to it, so it's not the actual customer. We still need to add a load profile here. So this is where you would upload your load profile to the site, but we want to do something like a manufacturing 5-day load profile to the site, and we're going to rescale that load. So this would be something, it's like, I think this particular bill was something like 1400 kilowatts maximum demand, a very large site. And then now we've got the information is now populated. And there's a couple of things that's happened here. So it's actually pulled out the necessary bits for the network tariff. And you've got a best match feature that can now help you identify the right one. So here it's actually identified the correct tariff. So it's the Scottish, so it takes the MPAN and finds the right distributor, and then it's trying to match up what is the right tariff band for this particular site. So it's recommending this HV site-specific band 4 tariff. We just need to put in the maximum import and maximum export capacity limits, which you'll find on the bill, and then hit save. And then what it's doing is we've now gone and pulled that information and taken the current most current rates for the network tariff and using that in the system. So here we can see here's the network tariff already pulled in, and similarly when we look at this one, it's pulling in the energy rates and usage rates into the bill as well, and we can use this in our project as well. Now there's some other little changes that we might need to make to this, and we're actually going to change this little notice up here. So a couple of things that you might just need to check is that if there's time of use rates in the bill, you want to make sure that the time of use rates that have been set up in the system are correct. The time of use information is not always on the bill, so that's a bit of an issue. Another issue is the capacity market levies are not always there as well. So one of the things that you might have to do is set that up as is adding the capacity market levy in at as a usage time of use component to this as well, and setting it up with the right times. So just some little things that you might have to do when you're running with this, particularly for these UK examples, which will iron out in future iterations of this. So that's the bill scan feature. So that should make it now really easy now to work with these types of really complicated bills and be able to do the types of modeling that I just described, where you've got to try and identify these opportunities. So I'm running out of time here, so I just want to now swap back to the deck quickly and just talk to these examples. And what we actually did is take these examples and actually look at them across the UK. So we took some brood and we took down parts and we moved them around the country and we exposed them to different network tariffs around the country. And we assessed these ones based on what is the most valuable type of investment that we can make here. So if we're looking at these from optimizing for net present value and each of these different locations, that was the lens that we passed through this. So it's not always going to get you the way that you might look at the optimal size for a battery will change across these different drivers. So I just want to highlight that it's done on the basis of economics, not necessarily for other drivers. And we took these two projects and then we assessed these projects. And what we saw is that when you do these, when you go from the solar only and we add the batteries and you do that tariff change, you can see that Liverpool's sitting in here in this dark red zone, but the types of opportunities that I just showed you and described for you exist all across the country, and somewhat aligned with the better locations for solar across the country, but not always. But when you look at the benefits on this chart, where you actually show here's all the different opportunities ranked highest to lowest for the solar only projects, and if you take that same ranking of distributors, it changes the best locations change a little bit in terms of when you add the batteries, but across the board we're seeing nearly a doubling of the project revenue as a result of doing the solar plus the battery. And similarly for amped up parts, which is that sort of fully disaggregated bill, more complicated opportunity. It's actually the middle of the country where these solar projects perform the best. And when you move to solar plus batteries, that actually starts to sort of breaks down a bit. And it's actually the sort of eastern side of the country plus the western side of the country, which was found to be the best. Now, I want to point out that this was done on the FY25 network tariff rates. And if you're now looking at FY26, you're going to get a completely different picture. And in fact, you cannot draw, you can draw some conclusions from this analysis. We wanted to show that like how the projects improve across the country, and it give you some kind of directionally correct indication of like how things work. But actually, the economics of projects will change for every single site, because battery economics are made up of the tariffs, which we've covered today, but also the solar generation, how much solar you can fit on the roof, how the tariff, the solar, and the load profile all interact together. If you're participating in energy markets, what energy market value you're getting, what the technology you're choosing as well. So how many hours is the battery? What's the degradation of the battery? What type of control you're using for the battery, and also any delivery models that you're trying to do. So if you're trying to apply PPAs, as we showed in an early webinar, you can get very, very different answers from the way that you look at batteries as when you start to apply that PPA lens into the mix as well. So it's critical that you model absolutely every single time these battery projects, and not jump to rules of thumb, or James said that Liverpool's great, so all battery projects are going to be great in Liverpool. That is not how you want to be looking at these types of opportunities. It is critical to model every single time. So the three key takeaways I want you to take from today is, one, really understand your customer's problem and make sure you're designing for that problem, because the answer by which, what is best, I commonly have people ask me, what is the best battery? Well, it comes back to what is the best battery that actually fits the needs of the customer, and what are we trying to solve for here? The second point is, I want you to always ask yourself, where is the 16p once per day cycle coming from? And that's super, super critical to make sure that we get that 16, we find that 16p, not just in the summer months when there's solar self-consumption, but also for other times of the year. And finally, also to shy away from the complexity of these things, right? The devil is in the detail, the opportunity is in the detail for these battery projects. And so using a platform like Orkestra is going to make your life a lot easier to be able to find these opportunities and be able to model and deal with all that complexity. Obviously, if you haven't started a trial already, please go and start a trial. We're here to help. The team is there to work with these projects and get you set up and advise and answer these questions around what is the best project, or I don't know what tariff I should be looking at here. We can assist with those types of those questions. And that's it.
Perfect. Thanks, James. Thanks for the presentation. While you've been busy presenting all that, there's been lots of questions coming through. So we'll start diving into some of these. There's some really good ones in here. One from Matt, I think is really relevant, which is, can any size customer move on to a fully itemized bill or an unbundled bill? What does that look like? I know you've used the shapeshifter tariff in here as an example, but yeah, it would be great to hear a little bit more about like who can actually take advantage of this as a business.
Yeah, so Octopus will allow people to be on the shapeshifter bill up to 150 megawatt hours. So I actually spoke to the team a couple of weeks ago that designed the tariff. They're obviously really interested in what we're presenting here, because this is it's good news for them in terms of like supporting people to move on to cleaner energy resources, which is very much mission aligned for them. And so yeah, so that tariff is available up to 150 megawatt hours per annum. And then above that, then you move into the mid market, and which is, as it's called, which is kind of like where these pass-through tariffs are more available. Now they're not they're not the default is what we're finding in the UK. So in Australia, as soon as you move over that threshold of like 100 megawatt hours and you go from being a small customer, treated as a small customer in the SME space, to being a large customer, you're immediately moved on to a fully unbundled bill where all of these rates are automatically on there, and that's just the default. Whereas in the UK, that doesn't appear to be the default, and actually you have to do some work to help coach and work with a customer to move it on. But all these retailers will generally have this option to be able to move on to those pass-through tariffs. So if they're with a British Gas or an npower or whoever it is, going back to those companies and just saying, hey, we're on this kind of bundled arrangement right now, but can we have a pass-through, is generally going to be achievable, and likely without breaking contract as well, because you're sticking with the same retailer and they've still got the account and they've still got the load. Otherwise, you need to probably go and work with an energy broker and work with that energy broker to find some rates from another company. If the retailer's been stubborn, you're probably going to have to look at moving that company onto a new retailer. And as part of that process, you're going to be looking to move them onto a bill which has got much better price signals.
Yeah, lots of options out there. A couple of good questions from Andy. So I guess we've talked a lot about batteries today. So I think do all batteries or inverters offer this level of smart control? So what are we looking for when it comes down to hardware? And how can we get that sort of optimization from a battery?
Then generally, the answer is no. So an optimized control is a type of control where it has an ability to make smart decisions. And the type of decision making that it's going to be doing is it'll look at, say that you've got a day where there's not much solar is anticipated in that particular day. You want to, the battery is going to want to be able to charge up at night using those night rates and then discharge in during the day rates. And then where there is solar, it's wanting to make sure that if there is, you want to have the battery as empty as possible leading into the middle of the day to be able to charge up with the energy from the solar system to then discharge into the end of the day. So there's some smarts that are involved into that. There is a lot of different control system options that are out there, some that come with the actual batteries themselves. And so some battery companies are actually building the smarts into the batteries. And then others where you're going to have to try and find a control system provider that provides like an EMS, like it's commonly called an EMS solution, that is doing the work of optimization, and it has these types of optimizations included into them. But yeah, I don't have any firm recommendations for anyone to sort of jump onto and go and start to look at. I'm just generally aware of that they exist out there in the world.
Yeah, thanks for that. A good one coming from Rob, just around that 16p rule. So is there a sort of capex or a cost per kilowatt hour that you're kind of using, working that off as a rule of thumb?
I knew someone was going to ask this, and I don't have the answer at the tip of my fingers, Rob. So yeah, I'd have to take that one as go back to my notes and be able to pull that up for you. But my memory of it was on the basis of a battery being 10 years of operation and a capex something in the order of 450 to 500 pounds per kilowatt hour. So yeah, on the high side, but generally, I think it's worth being conservative with these types of metrics, because you would when you can improve on the cost of the capex, that's obviously going to improve things, and you can go for a much lower, that threshold starts to drop. But it's a good starting position because that is where you're looking for these. That's ultimately how the value is going to be created from the battery, by looking at these, looking for these kinds of arbitrage opportunities that exist out there in the world.
Yeah, I think this is probably another good question, because there's lots of questions coming in specifically about the charts that we've seen in this presentation. So if people are looking to find some more information about that, where it's actually got the breakdown of all that modeling that you've done, where can they find that?
So yeah, so I think I was hoping that we could put I think in the chat, I'm hoping that Tess maybe has dropped in a link to the we'll put it into the here, a link to the strategic playbook. Within the strategic playbook, at the very end of it, is an appendix. We have all the optimal project sizes within that. You can click on the links to those projects. You can load those up in Orkestra, and you can actually go through and you can see how we've built out these projects. Where possible, I've tried to be I've tried not to be too bullish. I've tried to make these as real as what a real world as possible. I've tried not to go too aggressively on any of the capex numbers. Where we've someone's here is asking about the duration of the project modeling. I think I was doing the project modeling over 20 years and accounting for a battery replacement sort of midway or just after midway through these projects. So these are all pretty realistic numbers here. And yeah, I'd encourage you to sort of get a copy of the strategic playbook, go and have a look in that appendix and just have a look through the results and make a judgment for yourself as to how real world and realistic these are.
Yeah, perfect. I've just posted that in the chat. So if anyone wants to open that link, they can have access to that there, which has got all those slides. It's very, very detailed presentation and reporting there. It's got all the different solutions that have been modeled in all those different locations around the UK. So you can look at all the details in there. I've got a couple more here. I know we're sort of going over time, but there's lots of questions that have come through. A couple in here just about, exploring battery opportunities on sites with existing solar, or what would it look like can you set up in Orkestra, a battery project where it's doing arbitrage or time of use arbitrage in a scenario without solar being a part of it? Is that an option?
Yeah, you totally can. Yeah, so solar doesn't necessarily need to be part of the mix here. So yeah, you can look at you can just set up a site and then look at a battery plus a tariff change as an example. Or we've got a question here about P415. As end of the week, we're going to have that in there as well. Looking at what does it mean to have a battery in there that's doing P415 plus the behind the meter revenue streams as well, of which I'm going to try and organize to have an entire separate webinar just looking at this opportunity, probably in a few weeks' time, because there's a lot to unpack with P415. It's not straightforward, and really requires a whole dedicated session on that. But yes, within the tool, you don't have to be modeling solar. It just so happens that when you've got lots of export on a site, that's actually a really good opportunity for batteries to be charging from. And so not having solar on the site is, and where it's possible, is a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and I guess there's another one here, which is a good question around, you've compared that baseline to, one tariff, which is that octopus shapeshifter. But if you were looking to test multiple tariffs or figure out which was the most optimal tariff, if you had 3 or 4 that you wanted to try, whether it's all from Octopus or whether they're from different retailers, is that possible to do in Orkestra?
Exactly. Yeah. So you can create different tariff groups within the. So you can actually even look at a bundled tariff versus a pass-through tariff, or a flat rate tariff versus a day-night tariff versus a octopus shapeshifter tariff. Or I understand that Octopus is not the only company out there that offers this type of tariff. You might want to look at a bunch of different options there and compare them all. And that's all possible as part of the tariff comparison feature within the software.
Yeah, excellent. And there's one good one here from Connor. Is there a lack of pass-through tariffs for BESS optimization offered by energy suppliers in the UK market?
Yes. Like the default is clearly not to pass through price signals. Now, I don't know, this might not all be on the energy suppliers in the market. I think this is somewhat, I think to a customer that doesn't see a means by which they can flex their load, having a flat rate tariff is probably seen as beneficial today, right? So if you're not thinking about how to flex your load, either by using demand response or installing a battery, it's just not in your kind of like thinking space to even consider moving onto a tariff where the peak rate is, 41 or 42p per kilowatt hour. That just seems like a risk. But I think what we can do here is through tools like Orkestra is that we can show that actually moving onto these tariffs is not as scary as it looks, and we can show empirically, well, this is what would have happened in the last year had you been on this tariff in the last year, and yes, that makes you a saving already, even before we go and start looking at the solar and battery stuff. And so I think yes, there's a lack. Is it all the suppliers' fault that there's a lack? Maybe. I think there's a very, very strong case against distributors and transmission companies that have moved a lot of the price signals that used to be in network tariffs in the UK into the to the residual charges, to the fixed component of those residual charges, which is, in my view, an absolute travesty, because it is providing no very muted price signals to consumers to actually change their activity and reduce the stress that's on the UK grid. I mean, everyone seems to be talking about the lack of capacity in the grid in the UK, but actually the network companies are not doing anyone any favors by not passing through price signals for people to actually change how they're using the grid today, unless you move to these pass-through tariffs. And then even then, compared to what we see in Australia and the types of tariffs that we see in Australia, they are nowhere near as valuable from the perspective of doing batteries. So critical to the value stack and critical to be layering up and to find these values. But yeah, still work to be done, I think, within the energy industry in the UK to be actually passing through price signals that are reflective of the challenges that are in the markets right now, and allowing consumers to be able to install these systems and actually reduce not only their costs but also the stress on the whole grid.
Yeah, thanks, James. All right, well, we've got a little bit over there, so we might wrap it up, but I'd like to thank everybody for joining today. It's been great to dive into it. I guess the message here is that there's a lot of complexity out there when it comes to modeling, which is why Orkestra exists in the first place. So if you haven't started a trial with us, please feel free to sign up. We're here to support you and get started with 3 weeks of support. I'm just going to post in the chat here a quick little survey. So just ask a little bit about what you thought of the content today. If you had any suggestions or feedback, we love hearing feedback. We like taking it into our next webinars. As James mentioned, our next webinar we're most likely going to run, and it's going to be a deep dive on P415, because there's just a lot to unpack there, and it's going to take its own 1 hour to do that. Now, we will be sending out a recording of the session. We're going to send out an email tomorrow for everybody. That's going to be another link back to the playbook or the white paper, also a recording to this video. But thank you very much. Thanks, James. Thanks, Caleb, for joining us today and presenting that. And we look forward to seeing everyone next time. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.